I've never told anyone why I really left nursing. People think it was burnout, but the truth is much darker. This happened during my final rotation at a private clinic in Ward C, a place for forgotten souls. It was a Tuesday night in the middle of a brutal winter. I was alone on the floor, responsible for 12 patients. The heating system was acting up, making the vents hum with a low, vibrating sound. Around 2 a.m., the air became thick and hard to breathe. I was sitting at the station when the call light for room 309 started blinking. The woman inside hadn't spoken in 6 months. She was in a vegetative state. When I entered, she was sitting bolt upright, staring at the corner of the ceiling. She pointed a trembling finger and whispered, "He's tired of waiting." I saw nothing but shadows, but as I turned to leave, I heard a rhythmic sound coming from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. It was slow and deliberate. Behind that wall was a solid brick elevator shaft, sealed off decades ago. I hurried back to the desk, my skin crawling. Minutes later, every call light on the board started flashing at once. In every room, patients were pointing at the walls in terror. I tried to call for help, but the phone line was dead. Then the lights went out. Total, soul-crushing darkness. In the silence, the knocking returned. It was everywhere. I turned on my flashlight and saw a tall, thin shape unfolding from the ceiling near room 309. It moved like a spider, limbs clicking with every motion. I locked myself in the medicine room and watched through the glass as that thing crawled across the floor. It had no face, just a smooth, pale surface. A voice filled my head, sounding like dead leaves. One more soul for the shift. The knocking on the door continued for hours. I heard the screams of patients suddenly cut off, followed by a terrifying silence. I sat on the floor and waited for death. When the sun finally rose, the silence returned. I checked room 309 first. The woman was gone. The bed was perfectly smooth, as if no one had ever been there. Every other room was the same. Empty beds, no bodies, no blood. When the morning shift arrived, they looked at me like I was insane. According to the hospital database, I had been the only person in Ward C for 3 days. There were no patients, no records of anyone being admitted to those rooms for years. They said I had a breakdown, but I still have the bruise on my arm from where a patient grabbed me. And sometimes when my apartment gets too quiet, I hear it from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. He's finally done with the walls. I've been a night shift janitor at Oak Valley General for nearly 10 years. You get used to the smell of bleach and the flickering fluorescent lights. But the basement level, the morgue and the old storage wing, that's a place where even the most seasoned staff don't like to linger. It was a rainy Tuesday around 2:45 a.m. I was mopping the long corridor leading to the service elevator. The hospital was unusually quiet. No gurneys rattling, no distant monitors beeping, just the rhythmic swish of my mop. As I passed the old records room, a door that is always locked, I noticed it was standing wide open. A pale, flickering light was coming from inside. Thinking a resident doctor had left it open, I stepped in to close it. The room was freezing. Rows of metal filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with the history of everyone who had ever died in this building. On the main desk, there was a single file, a red chart. In our hospital, red charts are for extreme infectious risks, but we hadn't used paper charts like that in years. Everything is digital now. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. There was no name, only a date, tonight's date, and a time, 3 a.m. Under the cause of death section, the paper was still wet, as if the ink had just been laid down. Suddenly, the heavy metal door behind me began to creak. I spun around, but the room was empty. Then, from the very back of the filing rows, I heard it, a soft, wet clicking sound, like someone trying to walk on plastic-wrapped feet. Click, slide, click, slide. I backed out of the room, my heart hammering. I ran for the service elevator and hit the button for the first floor repeatedly. The lights flickered as the doors slowly groaned shut. As the elevator began to rise, it suddenly jolted. The floor indicator went dark. I was trapped in total darkness. Then, the emergency red light kicked in, bathing the small space in a bloody hue. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't bleach anymore. It was the smell of old copper and stagnant water. I looked up at the ceiling hatch. Something was dripping. A thick, dark liquid was oozing through the cracks, landing on my shoulder with a heavy thud. It wasn't water. It was dark, viscous blood. I looked at the elevator buttons. The basement button was glowing bright red, even though I hadn't touched it. The elevator began to plummet. My stomach flipped as we descended back down to the morgue level. When the doors finally opened, I wasn't in the hallway anymore. The elevator had opened directly into the cold storage room where the bodies are kept. Every single locker was open. The metal trays were pulled out, but they were empty. No sheets, no bodies. I turned to run, but there, standing in the center of the lift, was a figure. It was wearing a surgeon's gown, but where the face should have been, there was only a jagged hole wrapped in yellowed bandages. In its hand, it held the red chart. It slowly raised a pen and pointed it at me. I scrambled for the stairs, bursting through the fire doors and running until I saw the morning sun hitting the lobby glass. I never went back for my paycheck. A week later, I heard from an old coworker. They found the red chart on the basement floor. He told me that when they opened it, the cause of death was finally filled in. It said, "Scares to death," and the name at the top of the file was mine.
My name is Mark, and I used to be an EMT. Not long ago, I found myself between jobs, so I took a temporary position as a security guard at the old Mercy Hospital. Most of the building had been closed for years, but a few wings remained operational for overflow patients. My shift was always midnight to 8 a.m., watching empty halls and waiting for something to happen. It was 4:17 a.m. on a night when the rain was relentless, hammering against the old windows. I was in my security booth when the ancient intercom crackled to life. A faint, distorted voice came through, requesting assistance for a patient in room 207. My blood ran cold. Room 207 was in the East Wing, a part of the hospital that had been completely decommissioned for over a decade. No patients, no staff, not even working electricity. I picked up the receiver and asked who was there, explaining that the wing was closed. After a long pause, a soft, childlike voice, thick with a cough, whispered that they couldn't breathe and needed their medicine. I told myself it must be kids who broke in, but the voice sounded genuinely distressed. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the East Wing. The air there was thick with the smell of dust and forgotten things. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows that made every corner seem to hide something. I found room 207 and noticed the door was slightly ajar. As I approached, I heard two soft, insistent knocks from inside, like a child tapping their knuckles on the wall. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, but a faint greenish glow pulsed from an old rusted IV stand in the corner. The bed was stripped bare, the mattress stained and torn. No one was there. I whispered a hello, asking if anyone was present, but there was no answer, just a faint, raspy cough. On the bedside table lay a small, old-fashioned wooden toy train. Etched roughly into the wood were the words, "Thank you."
As I looked at it, the green glow intensified, flickering wildly. Suddenly, the heavy door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into absolute darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my heart pounding against my ribs. When the light finally clicked on, I saw that the entire room was covered in drawings, not on paper, but directly on the walls in what looked like dried blood. Stick figures and distorted faces with empty eyes stared back at me. From the corner near the IV stand, a soft, guttural chuckle filled the room. The air grew impossibly cold, and I felt tiny, ice-cold hands brush against my leg. I screamed and scrambled for the door, tearing at the handle, but it was locked from the outside. The intercom crackled again, but the voice was no longer childlike. It was a layer of twisted, guttural whispers chanting that it was my turn to stay. I pounded on the door until my throat was raw. When the security team found me at sunrise, the door was unlocked and the room was empty. The drawings were gone, but carved into that wooden train, right next to the words "Thank you," was a new name, Mark. I never went back to that hospital. Now, whenever my phone rings in the dead of night, I don't answer. I'm afraid I'll hear that childlike cough again, asking for medicine.